Welcome to another episode of Life and Whiskey. As always, I'm Jordan. Today we are going to do something that I've not been really good at, really ever. There's going to be a lot of pulling bottles and looking up prices, computer from my list. So I will try to edit that out. We'll see how it goes. If I'm able to pull stuff quickly, maybe I won't edit it out. Watched Whiskey Row today on YouTube. Had a really good idea, and I liked it a lot. So I'm going to copy it to some degree, maybe hopefully build on it a little bit. He had put up the 9 best whiskeys in his opinion to gift to other people. Made some very, very valid points there. So I'm going to build off of that a little bit. I liked a lot of the bottles that he selected. So I'm actually going to copy those bottles specifically and reiterate them. I have a little bit different opinion as to why I think those are good bottles to gift. And we're going to put this out on BitChute on Wednesday. Today's Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. I'm going to release this tomorrow on BitChute. We're going to jump ahead. We're going to cap off and cut off some of the videos I had lined up already. And we're going to make this one go live. I think I'm also going to interject this one on YouTube right away. So if you're following sequentially in the whiskey review, the numbers, this one's just going to be thrown in there. I don't even think I'm going to put a number on it. But so let's get started here. Now, Whiskey Row, he put out bourbons specifically, and I have to agree with his lineup. They were really, really good picks. Now, for starters, if you're gifting somebody a whiskey, if they're snooty about it, they're just a dick to start with. Like, if that person is into whiskey at all, at any level, hopefully they are gracious and thankful just for the gift of free whiskey, just for a gift. I mean, I will never, if somebody's either offering me a pour or giving me a bottle, I don't care what it is. Like, out of my entire collection, there's like 1 or 2 bottles that I would still be gracious about. I'd be like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. But in the back of my mind, I'll be like, ooh, this is bad. But there's less than 5 for sure bottles in my entire collection. I am starting to push over, up to and around 300 bottles at this point, including bottles under $10 that I would thumb my nose at, right? Like there are so few whiskeys out there that are so terrible that I'm just like, ugh, no. But I'd still be happy that somebody thought of me and gave me whiskey. So the first thing to get, so that's the first thing, right? Like, hey, they should be happy no matter what you get them. Now that some people who know me and know my wife know that we're into whiskey, we get more and more people asking us, like, hey, I want to give a gift to somebody. What should I get them? Or I'm going to a party. What should I bring? For starters, not everybody's into whiskey. And secondarily, there's a big distinction between somebody who's into whiskey and somebody who likes to drink. If you're an alcoholic and you just like to drink, chances are, if you're really far gone, you don't care what's on the table in front of you, you're just housing it. But chances are, you're probably into something very specific. Like, this is my drink. End of story, right? That's a hard buy. Maybe you just get them a bottle of something that they already like. But if you are looking to give somebody a gift that that they can appreciate whiskey, whatever it is, I'm going to throw out some bottles that I think most people would be extremely happy with. And when it comes to gifts, we're not breaking the bank here. We're not up in the $100 range. Something like this Weller, right? Like, a lot of people, this is unobtainium for a lot of people. If for some reason you were able to find this, and if for some reason you were able to find it for a reasonable price, like the $49 that we paid for this, yeah, that's something that it's an okay whiskey in my opinion, but it's one of those things that so many people are chasing any of the Buffalo Trace lineups that it brings some recognition, and if you can find it for a reasonable price, it exceeds its price point, right? So like if you're finding it for 40, most people are like, "Oh my gosh, where'd you find this? How'd you get it?" Same with like the Weller Special Reserve. That's a $23 bottle or a $28 bottle. Um, the E.H. Taylor that I have, right? Like I paid $63 in town. That was a big overpay. But I really wanted the bottle because I already had one and it's one of my favorite whiskeys. And so like I think I paid $34 or $37. It was something ridiculous. Like that's what the MSRP is. That's what it should cost. And I've seen it for sale for 140, 160, and not for like the single barrels or anything like that. Just the regular E.H. Taylor small batch I've seen for outrageous prices. But if for some reason you are able to come up with a Buffalo Trace product besides the standard Buffalo Trace, which in some areas I understand is difficult to get, but by and large, nationwide, Buffalo Trace as a whiskey is easy to get and should be $20, $25. I've heard it as $40 is kind of the standard in some states, some places. Okay, whatever the standard is, it shouldn't be much beyond that. Um, but if you can find a Buffalo Trace product of some sort at a reasonable price, great. That's a great gift because for a lot of people, that's something that's difficult to find and difficult to find at a reasonable price. So always kind of keep that one in the back of your mind when you're traveling. I will make that recommendation because it's this lauded thing that most people are chasing, right? So from a gift standpoint, that's a good one. In line with that, though, much easier to find, and in my opinion, much better. Wait, let's back it up. First things first. So I was talking about, before I got on my rant there, I was talking about whether or not the person is into whiskey or if they're a whiskey nerd. That's the other direction you can go. So I'm a whiskey nerd, right? Like I want to take a bottle and I pick it apart and I nose it and I smell it and I taste it and I water it down and I do this and I do that and I just have fun with it, right? And like I know that I like this very specific flavor profile. If there's a category of whiskey, in that category, this is what I'm looking for. Specifically, if I just want to sit down and enjoy a whiskey every time, right? So there's that person, and there's not a ton of us out there, right? Then there's everybody else who just wants a good, nice whiskey and drink it. They don't really care about the backstory and the distillery or how old it is or whatever, right? So for the average person, and it's nice to be in this category, just any nice bottle will do. However, I would make the caveat that you need to, like, if you're giving a gift to them, I would suspect that you know a little bit about this person. So, number one, what type of whiskey do they really like? Is it bourbon? Is it Scotch? Is it rye? Is it Irish? Figure that out first, and that might lead you um, into a category to start with. And there's two philosophies here. Everything just kind of keeps treeing out and branching out. But um, do you want to get something that is already in their wheelhouse? That, like, hey, if they're a bourbon person, well, I mean, shoot, there's 10,000 bourbons on the shelf today. Do you want to stick to that? Or do you want to get them something that's different in a different category of whiskey that might be a good entry into that new category? Um, Now, as a broad spectrum statement, most people appreciate a whiskey that is on the sweeter side, doesn't really have that harsh tannic bitterness in it, doesn't have a ton of oak impact, and is not very spiky or bitey from start to finish. And with that, also, most people prefer a lower proof whiskey. Okay? Something 90, 95 and under, although there are several hundred proofers out there that drink lower. There's several 120 proofers that drink a lot lower also. But in stating that, it's mainly trying to get something that is very approachable for the average person. Okay? So I would suggest depending on how well you know this person, if they're willing to step out, that you kind of start matching the flavor profiles from one category to the next. Perfect example. Um, Connemara. This is a great Irish whiskey, in my opinion. I'm not a huge Irish whiskey fan. I think there's only 3 distilleries, maybe a handful more in all of Ireland. So all the different brands you see out there are made by the same producers. And this Connemara specifically is a peated Irish whiskey. So the reason why I bought this, A, it was 40 something dollars, so reasonably priced. B, it's peated. I am a peat junkie. My wife is a peat junkie. This is a great jumping off point because it does bring all of the Irish whiskey characteristics with the added light dusting of peat to it. It's not overwhelming. It's a great introductory to peated whiskey, smoked whiskey, which might open the door to something like an Islay whiskey or just peated Scotch in general. Um, and so something like that, where you're finding like just the light notes of a new category, but it represents the category it's in very well. So, for me, Irish whiskey, you get that shortbread cookie note, maybe a little bit of floral notes, vanilla. In my opinion, most of them tend to have kind of that metallic part to them. I'm not a big Irish guy. But this is a great Irish whiskey, in my opinion, because it ticks all those boxes, plus has that peat, which is a whole new experience. And for $40, totally worth jumping into. So I'm actually going to recommend this one as a whole. Next, we're going to jump into Scotch real quick. Scotch, huge category. There's the different regions of Scotland that produce different characteristic whiskies. So you got the Campbelltown, the Lowland, the Highland, Speyside, and Islay, the 5 different categories. Sometimes Speyside will be thrown into the Highland category. That is the largest. The Highland Scotches is the broadest category. For me personally, I've maybe had 20 different varieties of Highland Scotches. They come off very fruity, very light. You get like a pear. You get they come very light. So even like I've had like 40-year-old like Glenfarclas and stuff like that. To me, it's the flavor profile is very subdued. It's very easy drinking, easy sipping whiskey. So if you know the person that you're looking to buy something tame in the flavor world, like they don't like those bold and rich and dense flavors, I'm going to steer you towards a Highland whiskey. A lot of people think that Scotch as a whole, as a category, is peated. It's smoky. I've had my brother try whiskey and he goes, "Oh yeah, I can taste the peat." And I'm like, "Dude, there's no peat in that. You cannot taste the smoke because there is none." And that's kind of that power of suggestion thing to start with. Um, but peat and smoke in general is one of those things that you either love it or hate it. There's very few people that seem to be on the fence with it. I personally love it. I actually cannot think of a single peated whiskey that I dislike, including like the Balcones, or that's not peated, but it's smoked. The Balcones, Brimstone, which is a corn whiskey that is smoked. I just like how it comes together, right? So that's me personally. But you can find different representations of each of those scotches at a different level. The one thing I will say is buy either a single malt or a blended malt whiskey. Now, your blended malts are most often cheaper than your single malts. Not always true. There's some blended malts that are very expensive. I would avoid blended scotch. So those are kind of like your 3 categories, right? So you have single malt, which is a single malted barley grain. Then you have blended malts, which is when you take 2 single malts and you blend them together, or 3 or 5 or how many ever. And then there's blended scotch, which I think it's like up to 80% of the whiskey in there is just grain alcohol, just ethanol. It's not a malt or whatever. That to me is a flavor that I can pick out almost anywhere. It's very metallic, very sharp, and in my opinion, doesn't blend. And so a lot of the very cheap Scotch is a blended Scotch that has that in it. Um, I would avoid that, because if you want to turn somebody off to a Scotch category, that as a whole, that's the best way to do it. Is give them some of that stuff, and then if their palate is able to decipher that, they're not going to like it. But you can get very cheap Scotch that is very delicious, in my opinion. Monkey Shoulder, it's made its appearance on this channel many times as a reference. To me, it's very butterscotchy, very sweet. It does have a slight maltiness to it, um, which is also a good way to step into that category. Like Monkey Shoulder or Highland Park is another one that kind of carries those flavor profiles but at a reasonable price. Here locally, we can buy it for like $27. I've seen it as high as 30, 35, maybe even $40, but it's a good, cheap Scotch to just jump into. Another one, so again, most of my Scotch is peated, but not all of it. Um, I'm trying to think of like reasonably priced bottles. So like Bunnahabhain, these are more expensive. These are $70, $80 bottles. I think this one was $40, in the mid 40s. But this is an Islay whiskey. Islay whiskeys are known for their heavy peat. These are your Ardbegs, your Lagavulins, your Laphroaigs, Bunnahabhain, Kilchoman, or Killochman, I don't know how you want to pronounce it. Ardnaho. Um, bu- 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 there's a couple others I can't think of, but Bunnahabhain, great distillery. These two are unpeated. So, if you want like a nice light approach to a whiskey, check out these. You know, they're gonna run you. Like I said, I think this one was in the mid 40s. This one was in the mid 60s. This one was in the mid. I don't know. I got it right here. Let's just look and see what it is. That way we don't need to keep guessing. So this was $60. This was 40. No, sorry. This was $55, and this was $48. So this 12 years, the most expensive one up here. $55. This is a great light introductory into peated whiskey, smoked scotches. Bunnahabhain's a great distillery. They do a very good job putting their whiskeys together. I highly recommend them. And to me, a good gift whiskey is something that's probably under $60, unless you're over the moon about this person. That you want to do something really nice, really fancy, really whatever. You can find amazing whiskey in any category for under $80 for sure, $60 most likely. I think of all the categories, actually, Irish whiskey tends to be the more expensive one. And in my opinion, not worth the money, but that's just my opinion. Um, there's also things like Taliskers. You can get Talisker Storm. You can get this for in the mid 40s maybe. This is another peated whiskey from the island of Skye, the Isle of Skye in Scotland. Well done. It's a little bit younger. It's a good entry into smoked stuff. So, like I said, the majority of stuff I have is smoked. That's where my personal flavor profile is, and I tend to try and push people into that category, at least from an exploratory standpoint, because most people have an idea of what they think Scotch is, what an idea of what peated Scotch is, and also, like here in America, we tend to be bourbon folks. So I try and get people to like step out a little bit, try it, taste it, dip their toe in there a little bit, see what they think with an open mind. And at the price points of those are good introductory bottles, and they bring enough characteristics that like those mid palates, so you get hit with the smoke, and then those mid palates bring through a lot of those sweet notes. So there's just more to it than just here's eating a charcoal briquette. So with that, I'm going to. Ooh, actually, sorry. One last thing. Kalila. So this one, this is Gordon and MacPhail. So if this is a brand, Gordon and MacPhail, and they sourced this whiskey from Kalila. Kalila, if you're getting a sourced Isla Scotch, it's probably coming from Kalila. Not guaranteed, but like 80 or 90% of the time. But it's okay because Kalila makes great Scotch. Again, peated, but it's soft on the peat. It's soft with all of its other flavor profiles. It's when people think of smooth whiskey, I would say Kalila falls into that category where it's just seamless from flavor to flavor to flavor. It's very enjoyable, very sippable, but also has a lot of sweet characteristics, which again is something that I think people are going to like. So, it's Gordon and MacPhail, whatever. But anything Kalila from the Kalila distillery, I am going to highly, highly, highly suggest. Um, so that is kind of my take on Scotch, and of course, there's thousands of things to choose from. Those are the two that I would recommend. Are like Speyside region, Highland region if they're into like subdued flavor, very light, so like a white wine that's kind of mellow. Or if they're into bold flavors, something with some peat in it, like Isla, the Talisker. That's where I want to steer you. Okay, so I know that was just like a brief and a lot of information, but let's get into bourbon because that's where the majority of people live, especially here in America. Um, so some great. Well, no, we'll do that in transition. So, great bourbon, in my opinion. So cheap, what do we pay for that? 20 something bucks, 30 something bucks. Hold on, let me jump to my bourbon page here. Yellowstone paid 30, call it 37 bucks. So, um, they have, so this is Yellowstone Select. They have a large variety of bottlings now, and they can get pricey, but for 30 something dollars, it's 93 proof. It brings a lot of flavor, a lot of sweet notes, and just a little bit of oaky vanilla on the back end of it. Very, very nice. Good for the price. Been watching the channel, you'll know that I am a Old Forester fan. Um, I would say if you're going to pick up an Old Forester, I would say they have a nice, dense palate. There's a lot of graham cracker, a lot of sweet, a lot of vanilla, caramel. If you get into some of the higher proofs, or some of the more aged stuff, you get a little bit more oakiness. Some of it has a little bit of bitter tannin to it. So again, Whiskey Row, he selected the 1910 and the 1920 as far as gifted whiskeys. I'm going to second that. Those are great whiskeys to gift. They're going to be in that $50 to $60 range. The 1920 rings in at 115 proof, so it's a little bit higher. The 1910, in my opinion, is one of my favorites. Very sweet, easy drinking, not too proofy. I have no faults with it. If you go back and watch my video where I review all of the Old Forester products, I do believe the standard Old Forester Signature 100 came out on top out of, head to head for me personally. That's their second cheapest whiskey. So they have an 86 proofer, I think. And then their Signature 100 is, it's 100 proof, but it drinks a lot lighter than 100 proof, brings a ton of flavor. It's sweet, it's delicious, very easy to sip. I highly recommend that. When it comes to bourbon, I would say that there's a couple categories or flavor profiles. Like you get into this kind of nutty one, which also kind of piggybacks. It's like peanut shell, peanut dust. You get some oak tannin that brings into that, where you get like this bitey punchiness. You kind of get your fruits where you can have, an apple or a cherry or like a strawberry, raspberry, kind of jammy quality. You get some graham cracker flavor profile. You get caramel, vanilla, um, drawing a blank. What do you call it? Molasses, brown sugar. Those are kind of your flavor profiles as it goes. So depending on what type of flavor the person you're buying the gift for really likes, will really steer which direction you're going to want to go. So Old Forester, sweet vanilla, caramel, a little bit of oak, kind of a floral characteristic to it, but just kind of a good all around representation of bourbon. I found all of their bourbons to have a good transition between flavors. They're not real spiky or bitey. On the same category, and again, echoing Whiskey Row here, Wild Turkey 101. Now, 101 often gets a bad rap from like college days, but again, watch my blind review head to head. Wild Turkey 101, especially these new bottlings with this turkey embossed on the bottle. This beat everything from my Wild Turkey distillery. And it's just good. It's sweet. It's cherry. If you haven't had it since college, I highly recommend you go back to it. It's complex. For me, it really hits the cherry category and the brown sugar category with a little bit of oak on it. It's just well put together and it's cheap. $25 for a liter most often. Good whiskey. Along with that, I'm going to pull out a couple of others here that I highly recommend. Um, the Rare Breed, the Long Branch, and the Russells. So all these these two especially get overlooked often, in my opinion. The Wild Turkey Rare Breed has been raved about for the last couple of years, and rightfully so. It's a great whiskey. I think this came in second place. No, this came in second place for me, but mainly because I could pick out the flavor profile. This, I think, came in third. So a little bit higher proof on the Rare Breed. You're coming in at it's barrel proof, so you're coming in at 58.4%, so 116 proof. But it drinks a lot lower than that, so it's not super bitey. You get a lot more density of those sweet caramel, brown sugar notes. Not as much cherry, in my opinion, and a little bit more oak, but not a bitter tannic oak. It's a nice, sweet oak flavor profile. The Long Branch, this should run you 50, 60 bucks, depending where you're at. I might have even picked it up cheaper than that. Let me quickly scroll up here. Wild Turkey, yeah, $42 is what I paid for this. It's a steal at that price for sure. Long Branch, I've seen it anywhere from $26 to $46. I think I picked this up in the 20s. For a while was my favorite Wild Turkey product out there. Now, it's mellowed in mesquite, charcoal, and that to me, like a lot of people talk themselves into it. I find none of that on the flavor profile. I don't think it really has any bearing to it. I think it's kind of a marketing gimmick. It's a nice looking bottle. It presents very well as a gift. Good flavor to it, but the flavors are mellowed down compared to these two, so it's a little bit easier sipper for somebody who's just looking to enjoy a nice whiskey. If they like dense flavors, then I would go this direction. But it's just nice. It looks good. Lots of embossing on the glass. And Matthew McConaughey is kind of the representative spokesperson of this one. Russell's 10-year reserve. If they don't already have it, they're not familiar with it. It's a 10-year age-stated whiskey, which is kind of nice. A lot of people think that age makes the whiskey, and it does. But they buy into this the older the better kind of philosophy, and I would say that's not true, especially for bourbon. In my opinion, bourbon really lives best between 6 and 10 years. You get much outside of that, the oak seems to take over, and it starts to go a more tannic, bitter direction that I personally am not a fan of. Some people really like that, but a great 10-year whiskey at a great price. Russell's picked this up for $32. It brings all the flavor characteristics of everything out here, but chances are a lot of people already have the 101 sitting around. If they do, maybe you want to steer them into this Russell's, give that a try. Excellent whiskey. So along with that flavor wheel of like what type of flavors they like, I also kind of will put it into like a distillery. Each distillery or brand seems to have a very distinct note or two that each of its line kind of carry with it, which if you watch any of the Whiskey Tube people, you'll kind of see that they, go, oh, this reminds me of Dickel, or this reminds me of, like the yellow banana and Laffy Taffy note to me. If I smell it or taste it, that's Jack Daniels. Hands down, I've not experienced it anywhere else other than Jack Daniels. There's certain things like that each distillery kind of is known, not maybe not known for, but for a person that'll kind of be the flavor set that is distinguishable for them. And for me, for most of the Wild Turkey products, it's a cherry note, very sweet cherry note with a nice brown sugar added in. So really, you can't go wrong with anything from them. These are easy to find absolutely everywhere at reasonable prices. Highly recommend them. They make great gifts. Next, something that might be a little more difficult to find depending where you're at. However, they are distributed far and wide, and that is the Wyoming whiskey. You have seen me rave about these for a long time. If you watched my head-to-head, once again, you'll notice I'm pretty sure the Wyoming whiskey standard small batch 5-year age stated whiskey, which you can pick up in most places, won the lineup, which is interesting because I have their 10-year anniversary, which my wife paid $175 for, and a bunch of other stuff. The double oak. Let me get that one out quick. One of our favorites, as you can tell, because the bottle's emptied down here, the double oak. Okay, so Wyoming whiskey small batch, $37, pretty reasonable. The single cask, so these are store picks or group picks or whatever. I've got a range on them from $49.99 to $57. If you know a liquor company or liquor store that's selling, oops, sorry, this is the double cask. These barrel picks, though, the private stocks, I've not had a bad one yet. They're pretty high in proof. This one's ringing in at, where is it? 118 proof, carries a lot of flavor. All of them are really delicious. The thing with high proof stuff is you can always water it down a little bit, which gives you the option to explore it a little bit more. But they tend to bring more flavor with the higher proof, so it can be a really good experience for somebody that you gift a whiskey to. The double oak, my wife and I are both into double oak products or finished whiskeys, no matter what category it's in. This double oak is really excellent in our opinion. We picked it up for $59, so now $60, let's call it. You're starting to get up there, but for $37, this one won the category, and it's excellent. You can find it most places. Should be under $45. Makes a great gift. They have a nice clean label, like this private stock. This one has John Wayne riding a buffalo on the back. I mean, all kinds of great stuff. Something to check out for sure. Again, I'm kind of going distillery by distillery, and you're going to have to match up those flavor profiles. So Four Roses, for me personally, is a fairly light flavor profile. Tends to be sweet, very floral, fruity, kind of mixing that apple, I don't know, like an apple blossom together, I guess I would say. Some brown sugar in there, or like confectioner sugar, very, very sweet. And again, any of the whiskeys that I am mentioning, go ahead, check out my reviews of those whiskeys and see exactly what I'm saying there, because I'm going off of memory on most of this stuff. But just recently, my wife picked up this small batch select. It was so $60 for this. This won my blind. It's excellent whiskey. it has a nice bottle, nice presentation. $60, kind of. That's what I'm trying to stick under that $60 mark for a gift. But it's an excellent one. A good bang for your buck, gets a lot of notoriety. Maybe it's the barrel that I got, or maybe it's just not my cup of tea. But the Four Roses single barrel. Anytime you have a single barrel product, there's the off chance that you are going to get an amazing barrel. There's also an off chance, a very, very small off chance, that you're going to get something that's not good at all. More often than not, it's kind of run of the mill. But if you find an amazing barrel, you can have a great experience with it. This was just kind of a okay barrel. But for a price tag, I seen it from $37. This one was $47. It's pretty darn good for that price. Although I would, and it comes in a very nice bottle, embossed. It presents well, has a little leather tag on it, readily available. It took some doing. It shouldn't, but it did take some doing to find this. I saw it in one store in South Dakota and one store in Montana, but I think for most of the country, this is pretty easy to get your hands on. I would say bump up the extra $15, $12 up to this rather than this, but you can't go wrong either way. Whiskey Row mentioned Woodford Double Oak. Woodford Reserve Double Oak, again, one of our family favorites. Great whiskey, reasonably priced. $45 is what we paid for that. It's a good price. Again, a finished whiskey, double oak. Anytime you see double oak, double cask, or finished whiskey, it tends to be my wife and I's flavor profile. Has a nice mixture of oak and sweetness and fruitiness to it. Dark fruit coming into it. But it's a good bottle. There's just nothing wrong with it. So I would recommend that. I second Whiskey Row's opinion on that one. Let's see. Sticking with bourbon. New Riff. This will be one of our next bottles, but that's not a bourbon. A little more spendy. I like the bottles, but out of the two bottles my wife and I have, we would take either of them any day. So we have their single barrel and their just standard bottled and bond. Single barrel was $45 and the bottled and bond was $34. Very reasonably priced. I think the look of the bottle is excellent. The juice in the bottle is outstanding. Time and time again, my wife and I will pour one of those, and the one or the other person will bring it up, and they'll, we each switch because we each get something different. We come down like, ooh, what's that? It just smells delicious. It tastes delicious. Trying to get my hands on some of their like malted rye and their rye and like a bunch of other different bottles. It's not that I can't. It's just I don't know. I don't always get to purchase what I want whenever I want. So I would highly recommend that. These make excellent gifts, not breaking the bank. I've not heard any complaints from anybody ever about these. So I don't know if you want to call them fancy or not. Reasonable, very, very reasonable price. If somebody's into Buffalo Trace, I started the video kind of talking about that, but I would highly recommend either of these. Bowman Brothers small batch. I don't know what I paid, 40 Buffalo Trace. So the Bowman Brothers, I paid $40 for the small batch. And then online, I was able to buy this Isaac Bowman, which is a port barrel finished. And again, back to finished whiskeys. I paid $36 for this. So $40, $36. If somebody's into Buffalo Trace flavor profiles, if they drink regular Buffalo Trace, or if they drink Benchmark or Ancient Age, or I don't know, those are kind of the lower end Buffalo Trace products. Highly recommend. Pick these up. They're a substantial jump in flavor profile, and I think the person would be extremely happy with either of these. Again, very nice classic look to them, but the flavor profiles are outstanding. Again, check the reviews of these that I did online. Now we're going to quickly jump into some very cheap offerings in the bourbon category, but even though they're cheap, in my opinion, they are outstanding, far above their notoriety, I would say. Then we'll jump categories here. All right, so I just reviewed this, but the video is not going to come out until next week sometime. So, Early Times Bottled and Bond. Check it out on the internet. Everybody raves about it. This might be the single best bang for your buck whiskey in bourbon, in my opinion. Is outstanding. It's 100 proof. Picked it up for $22.95 out in Oregon a week ago. You just can't go wrong with it. Very old Barton. Uh, Mellow, low proof, I think is 80 proof. Nope, sorry, 90 proofer. Has a pretty solid flavor profile. It drinks way bigger. I think I got this for $11. Very old, but sorry, I did pay more for this. I paid $17 for it, but excellent. This one I paid $11 for. Just Henry McKenna standard. Again, bottom shelf, screw top. $11. Excellent drinking. And finally, Bottled and Bond, JTS Brown Bottled and Bond. This one's more difficult to find because it's only released in like 5 or 7 states. If you live in a state where you can find JTS Brown, there's an 80 proofer, which I also have, which is excellent. Again, there's a liter. I think I paid $12 for the liter. Or my hunting partner gets these in Wisconsin for $9 for a liter. They're amazing. But the 100 proof is what's in this bottle cranked up another 50% in flavor profile. So if you like the flavor profile, you can't go wrong with the Bottled and Bond JTS Brown. It is outstanding. And that's kind of all I have for all of these. I think those are what I got for sure. I will make the mention again, another Buffalo Trace. If people like regular Buffalo Trace, definitely check out the Benchmark series. The standard Benchmark Old Number 8, in my opinion, is still an excellent whiskey, but the Benchmark like top floor it's like $26. It's getting raving reviews. They also have a Bottled and Bond. They also have a barrel proof, maybe, I don't know, but there's a whole like Benchmark series now. They're all really good. So I highly, pick up one of those, but they're all really cheap, under $30. We'll jump to this. This is kind of an out category here. So Dry Fly, made in Spokane, Washington. They get wide distribution, easy to find. I don't know about this particular bottling, how easy to find it is. But man, is it good. So Dry Fly is largely wheat whiskey, but they do make a bourbon and a bunch of other things. But this is a huckleberry port finished whiskey, and Dry Fly for those fly fishermen. There's a wolf pattern on there. It's 3 years old, but it's finished in a port barrel, and man, it's just sweet, good, easy sipping. Wife started to crank through this one. We found it and bought another one just to have it because we can get up in Montana. 90 proof. No faults with this. It's a great whiskey. It's a little floofy because the color is purple on there and whatever else. But if your person's an outdoor person, especially somebody who's into fly fishing, they'll greatly appreciate that. And especially for $33. And of course, there's a bazillion different things that you could pick for people. The last one, and this is also another Whiskey Row bottle that he suggested. I'm going to double down on it. The Redwood Empire, again, just bought this recently. Check out my review of it. It is outstanding. It's a Burr Rye, where it's a combination of bourbon and rye whiskey. It's good. It's MGP, I think. I'm pretty sure it's MGP product in here. It says buy a bottle and we'll plant a tree, so you get that aged at least 3 years. That's always nice. Let's see if I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I'm looking to see if it says blend of straight whiskeys, master distiller. It's named, and all the Redwood Empire stuff are named after trees in the redwood. So this is Lost Monarch. Bottled by Redwood. Doesn't say where it's from, but I'm pretty positive this is MGP whiskey out of Indiana. But the flavor profile is outstanding on it. It takes the best of both bourbon and rye and puts it together, and it knocks it out of the park, all for about $35. I know the place I bought this from, it was normally listed as $45. It was on sale for $35. From what I've heard around the country, $25 to $35 is kind of right where it sits as a normal price. Anything more than that, you're overpaying. But even at $45, great bottle of whiskey. Again, nice clean label, kind of a cool story with everything that's going on there. And with that, with the burr rye, we're going to move into rye, which is going to be our last category. Rye, if you follow this channel at all, you'll know is my favorite category. And for the most part, this is Tin Cup. Everybody's seen the commercials for it, the mountain whiskey, whatever. But it does come with a little shot glass or jigger, if you want, right here on top. Kind of gimmicky. Pretty sure this is MGP whiskey. Yep, product and aged for 3 years, distilled in Indiana. So most stuff that comes out, if it says distilled in Indiana and it's doesn't have its own brand, then it's largely going to be MGP. Nothing wrong, make great whiskey. Most of the rye whiskey on the shelf is from MGP, but they take this in Denver and they cut it with Rocky Mountain water. So water. It's just good whiskey. It's good rye. It's slightly different flavor profile than the standard MGP whiskey profile, but super good. And I think I got this for 30. And I am going to try and hit ryes that are out, that are not MGP, I'll say. Yeah, $30 is what I paid for this. It's really, really good. I do have some expensive ryes in here. They're finished rye. They have these really nice, very stout, very heavy bottles. Great gift items. This is expensive, $85. But again, it's a finish in a sherry finish. I want to get a port finish rye from Sagamore. They do great jobs with their whiskey. Anybody would be extremely happy with this. Even if you are not a rye fan, this is going to be a great toe dip into it, although it is expensive to be dipping your toe into, but you can't go wrong with a good finished whiskey. I will make this blanket statement when it comes to rye. If you're buying a rye for somebody who is already a bourbon fan and they are a fan of a specific distillery, definitely check out the rye offering from that distillery. So, for example, almost all the major bourbon producers have their own version of rye now. When I was looking at putting a distillery together, I was a huge rye fan and I was ahead of my time. Rye has really taken off in the last 5 years, maybe. And when I was looking at putting a distillery together back in 2015, I was like, man, I think rye is going to be the future. All the big boys started barreling at that point, and now all those 4, 5, 6-year-old plus ryes are hitting all the shelves. I have not had a bad rye from a major distillery, with one exception. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't mind-blowing. Knob Creek. What else we got here? Old Forester, Wild Turkey, Elijah Craig, and the Wild Turkey Rare Breed ryes. All are excellent ryes that are more bourbon than rye in flavor profile. They just have that slight bit of rye on the finish. They're very dense, syrupy, viscous sweetness from a bourbon standpoint, all the way till you get to the end where you get this really nice rye spice finish. I don't think you can go wrong with any of those. Two reasonably, like Michter's makes a really good rye in my opinion, but Old Overholt, it's a screw top, 100 proof, Old Overholt bottled in bond. This is one of my favorite ryes. It's a different style of rye. So this is what they call a Pennsylvania style rye, where it's a little bit more rye impact forward, a little more rye spice to it. It does not have as much of that bourbon type profile where you get the vanilla brown sugar, like those fruity notes and stuff. I really, really, really like this. It's cheap. It's like $17. Old Overholt bottled in bond. But really, I mean, a lot of the mainstream ryes out there, the Rittenhouse rye is an excellent one. But if you're looking for a fan of bourbons to buy them a rye, just go with one of the major ones. Woodford, Old Forester, Elijah Craig. The one downside I will say is if they're a fan of Jack Daniels, none of the Jack Daniel ryes seem to really fit the Jack Daniels profile. And I've been unimpressed with all of them. They're good. They're just nothing unique, interesting, mind-blowing, or anything like that. But I will say all the other ones are very nice, very well done, very interesting, carry a lot of flavor, so I highly recommend one of those. And with that, this video has taken for absolutely ever. I'll throw out 2 honorable mention shout outs. Number 1, Woodinville. If you can find a product from Woodinville in any category, you are not going to be let down. This particular bottle, $50. Not a bad price at all for a port finished bourbon that is just outstanding. Highly recommend Woodinville. More expensive, but it's Doc Swinson. I don't know where that one went. But Doc Swinson. If you can find a Doc Swinson, again, haven't had any bad things. I've only had the one Doc Swinson, but I haven't had any heard any bad things about it. Gonna run you in the $65 to $100 category, but it's worth it. And then once you start getting up in that 100 category, yeah, things start opening up. But if you can find a George Remus Repeal Reserve like this, it's not George, it's Remus Repeal Reserve. I have the 2, the 5, and the 6. They're all outstanding. Word's gotten out. They're getting more expensive. They're going to cost you $100 to $120. If you like strawberry, raspberry jam, creamy, like a creamsicle, strawberry creamsicle with some brown sugar, like just sweet, desserty goodness, these are excellent. They're harder to come by and they are more expensive, but my gosh, you're going to do well for yourself. So there you have it. If you're looking for whiskey for somebody, those are just some ideas that I'm throwing out there, kind of my picks, most of which were under $60, which is perfect for a price, whether you're taking it to a party as a house gift or whether you're giving it to somebody like Father's Day is next weekend or whatever else. Check those out, see what you think. But unfortunately, when you see all these recommendations, it's going to come down to who the individual is that you're buying it for. But go out there. Sorry this video is so long. I'm going to do the best I can to edit it down. Throw in the comments down below what you think, where I'm at, what your ideas for bottles are. And thanks for watching. You guys have yourselves a great day. And we'll catch you in the next video.